At 1000 hours local time, this Ukrainian MiG-29 crossed the front line at Kherson at 50 feet to take out a grain silo the Russians had repurposed into a drone command and control center. While the mission had been relatively quiet so far, this would all change in a matter of seconds. Unknown to the MiG-29, a Russian Igla manpads from a checkpoint directly ahead had the aircraft in its sight and let loose a missile. Smoke trail corkscrewing up, Seeker already locked onto those screaming engines. The pilot yanked hard left, then harder right into the missile's previous path, forcing an overshoot. But this was just the first one. 3 more launches within 4 seconds, different vectors. Russian troops were firing without lock tones, hoping proximity would compensate. The pilot's SPO-15 Berioza radar warner stayed silent. These Soviet systems can't detect passive infrared missiles, only radar-guided threats. Like a smoke detector that can't detect actual fire, only smoke. Rising plumes were his only warning as 3 heat seekers tried to converge on him simultaneously. The pilot entered a maximum brake turn, 9 Gs crushing him into the seat. Those missiles couldn't match it. All 3 overshot harmlessly. But those launch plumes just sent up giant smoke signals visible for 20 miles. Every Russian position from here to Crimea now knew exactly where to look. He dove back to 50 feet, threading above power lines at 540 knots ground speed. The radar altimeter screamed warnings. Minimum settings showed 50 feet, but actual clearance varied between 20 and 80 feet over the terrain. One moment of inattention meant becoming a very expensive lawn dart. This was nap of the earth flying at its most extreme, using terrain to break radar line of sight every 8 to 10 seconds. Power line corridors guaranteed no surprise obstacles, but then flying so low that rooftop manpads teams could look down at him. More Iglas launching ahead. Russians firing over the shoulder, launching behind his path, hoping he'd fly through the missile's acquisition basket. Each evasive maneuver burned 200 pounds of fuel from his 7,000-pound internal capacity. Simple math. 35 more hard turns like that, and he'd be walking home. His plane's navigation system was useless this low. Pure memorized waypoints on his Mark I eyeballs were the only things keeping him from becoming one with the Ukrainian countryside. Though he was successfully winning the world's deadliest game of dodgeball, a P-18 spoon rest radar was getting intermittent returns. This Vietnam-era beast operates in the VHF band at 150 to 170 megahertz, wavelengths that penetrate terrain better than modern X-band radars. Kind of like how you can hear the bass of your neighbor's music, but not the voice. The operator was starting to notice a pattern in the fleeting contacts, already alerting a Pantsir crew 12 kilometers ahead about the probable route. If he could even make it through this next swarm of Iglas. The newest inbound Iglas could see both near-IR and mid-IR signatures, designed specifically to resist flares. His 30mm chaff flare dispensers held only 60 cartridges total. He'd already used 6. The math was getting worse by the second. Another checkpoint ahead tried their luck, but firing at a jet doing 540 knots from a standing start was like trying to hit a bullet with a rock. That missile went stupid immediately, corkscrewing into a field. Banking hard around a radio tower, the pilot checked his 6. Clear for now, but more smoke trails were rising from positions he'd just passed. They were calling ahead, vectoring every air defense asset toward his probable route. The entire occupied territory was waking up like he'd just kicked an anthill.
Russian troops were firing without distinction from positions north of the Dnipro.
Search radars coming
Ukrainian
online,
aircraft based near the coast responded, striking designated targets on the eastern bank.
Every SAM system within 50 miles would know exactly where he was. First, he had to survive the next 30 seconds as another manpads team appeared on a factory roof. Missile already leaving the rail, he was out of maneuvering room between the power lines. The factory roof Igla forced him up to 200 feet. Dangerous exposure, but better than eating a missile. The SPO-15 threat display immediately exploded with contacts, multiple radar systems painting him across different frequency bands. Each spike represented a different threat. The Pantsir's 1RS-2E radar was switching between search mode with its 40-kilometer range umbrella and track mode at 20 kilometers, trying to lock him down for a shot. Search mode was like a lighthouse sweeping around. Track mode like a spotlight locked on. The moment it switched to track, he'd have seconds before missile launch. The pilot executed a notch filter maneuver, turning perpendicular to the Pantsir's radar beam. But When you're moving sideways relative to Doppler radar,
Để tránh
your
bị phát hiện,
signature matches ground
MiG-29 hạ
glide.
thấp độ cao xuống sát địa
Essentially
hình.
disappear
Khi máy bay
into
lướt ngang mặt
background
đất, tín hiệu
noise.
phản
This
xạ
meant
của nó bị che
deviating
lẫn
from
trong
his
nhiều địa vật,
planned route,
nhưng chùm sóng
adding miles, and burning fuel he couldn't spare. Every defensive maneuver was a trade-off between surviving the next threat and having enough gas to make it home. As the pilot was trying to dip, duck, dive, and dodge missiles, the Russians were setting up a classic SAM trap. The old P-18 VHF radar would flush him out. Its long wavelengths penetrating terrain impossible to hide from. Then the X-band fire control radars would engage. It's like using a tracking dog to find someone, then sending in attack dogs for the finishing move. Meanwhile, a Tor-M2 system was warming up from a cold start. These things need 3 full minutes to boot up their 9A331 electronically steered array. Once online, it could track 48 targets simultaneously and engage 4 at once. He'd be flying right into its engagement envelope in less than 2 minutes. If things weren't bad enough already, the Krasuka 4 electronic warfare system joined the party, beginning GPS jamming across the L1 and L2 bands at 1,575 and 1,227 megahertz. The pilot watched his GPS receiver flicker, 8 satellites dropping to 5, then 4. The JDAM needed 8 satellites for optimal accuracy, giving it a circular error probability of less than 5 meters. With only 4 satellites, that might balloon to 30 meters, the difference between hitting the building and hitting the parking lot. But Ukrainian engineers had anticipated Russian electronic warfare tactics. Their modified JDAM-ER had an enhanced inertial navigation system using ring laser gyroscopes. Even without any GPS, it could maintain 10-meter accuracy for 2 minutes, basically remembering exactly where it started from and calculating every tiny moment since. Time to check the weapon. The pilot switched his stores management system to BIT built-in test. Data flowed through the interface of the Ukrainian modified pylon. This wasn't supposed to work. American weapons on Soviet jets. But Ukrainian engineers had basically hotwired a USB connection between incompatible systems. GPS data uploaded, telling the bomb where all the satellites were right now. INS gyroscopes spun up. Battery showed 27 minutes of power, though it only needed 90 seconds for a 40-mile glide. All green lights. Programming the backup impact mode took 3 switch throws. If GPS failed completely, the JDAM would use barometric pressure and inertial navigation only. Less accurate, but still better than nothing. He adjusted release parameters for atmospheric conditions: 5-knot headwind at altitude, standard temperature, pressure 29.92. The bomb's computer would factor all of this into its glide path calculations. 30 seconds to the initial point. After this, he was committed. No abort. No alternatives. The Tor-M2 would be fully online in 45 seconds. He'd have to climb into its engagement envelope, release the weapon, and somehow survive the egress. The pilot took one deep breath, checked his remaining flares, 48 left, and prepared to point his jet at the sky. Behind him, the entire Russian air defense network was coming online. Radars sweeping, missiles spinning up, all focused on one Ukrainian MiG about to ruin their morning. The initial point smacked that bird like a freight train doing 90. The stick went straight into his gut, 5 Gs turning his body into concrete as that MiG's nose went pure vertical. Twin RD-33 engines screaming full afterburner, 36,600 pounds of raw thrust, converting the fighter into a surface-to-air missile with a pissed-off Ukrainian at the controls. That beast climbed at 280 meters per second initial rate, altimeter spinning faster than Vegas slot reels. This was textbook high-speed yo-yo profile, trading 540 knots of forward momentum into altitude gain, like a roller coaster using pure physics to conquer that first monster hill. The SPO-15's audio warning morphed from that searching weep-weep chirp into the solid tone that gives every fighter jock cold sweats at 3 a.m. The Tor-M2 had achieved full track lock. Through that HUD, he watched his airspeed bleeding off as altitude stacked up. 480 knots, 420, 380, each number dropping like his life expectancy. He needed to kiss 15,000 feet before hitting 180 knots, which was stall speed hauling external stores. Nasty math. Exactly 4 seconds in the release window at this climb rate. Too early, and that JDAM wouldn't pack enough juice for its 40-mile glide. Too late, and he'd stall with a Russian missile up his tailpipe. The Tor-M2 went hot. He didn't eyeball it. But that SPO-15 sang the news loud and clear. 9 M331 missile airborne, accelerating to 850 meters per second. With its 15-click range and 10-click altitude ceiling, intercept in 11 seconds flat. JDAM release in 6. He kept that stick buried in his lap, wrestling every instinct, screaming to maneuver. That weapon demanded stable flight for clean separation, or it'd tumble instead of gliding smooth. Passing through 12,000 feet, airspeed down to 250 knots, that missile was boring in, its command guidance link with the ground radar updating intercept solutions 10 times per second. The Russian operator had skills, maintaining lock despite the MiG's near vertical climb angle. 13,000 feet, 220 knots. Stall warning system started chirping, dancing right on the edge of controlled flight. 14,000 feet, 200 knots, almost there, almost there. At exactly 15,000 feet and 185 knots, the pilot pickled that JDAM. The pickle button dumped 28 volts through the store's management system straight to the pylon. Explosive bolts fired with a distinctive thunk he felt through his bones. That 500-pound bomb dropped away, tumbling initially until its GPS receiver grabbed satellites and the flight control computer woke up. Gas generators deployed those diamond-shaped wings with a white smoke puff. That weapon immediately began its 40-mile glide toward the grain elevator where Russian drone operators were conducting morning strikes against Kherson. But celebration was off the menu. He needed 2 more seconds of predictable flight for clean separation. 2 seconds that stretched like hours, with a missile closing at Mach 2. 1001. 1002. Separation confirmed clean. Now he could brawl. Rolling inverted, he yanked through into a split S defense, diving hard back toward Mother Earth. 6 BOL chaff cartridges spat from dispensers, blooming into a 100-meter-wide cloud of radar-reflective aluminum confetti. That 9 M331 missile rode command guidance until terminal phase. Ground radar had to maintain lock for steering. His sudden dive created a perfect Doppler notch, radio velocity relative to radar approaching 0, making him vanish from their screens like a damn ghost. The Russian operator switched to optical backup channel, trying to manually guide that missile through the chaff using a TV camera. It was like playing the world's deadliest video game with massive lag while someone chucked tinfoil at your monitor. He timed that dive like a Swiss watch, putting the missile above him just as its proximity fuse armed at 500 meters. The weapon detonated 300 meters away, close enough that tungsten fragments went everywhere like angry bees. One fragment punched clean through the port engine compressor section with a sound like God's hammer hitting a church bell. Exhaust gas temperature immediately spiked deep into the red zone. He throttled back to idle, then shut down the damaged engine completely. Fire warning light stayed dark. Good news. But he'd just lost half his thrust 40 miles deep behind enemy lines. The MiG-29 was engineered by Soviets who figured everything breaks eventually. Single-engine flight was totally doable. Just not ideal when every Ivan with a rocket launcher wants you dead. That MiG screamed over Ola Pristan at 800 feet. The whole damn city lost its mind. Every Zu-23 anti-aircraft position opened up simultaneously like it was the 4th of July. Twin 23mm autocannons vomiting out 950 rounds per minute each. The Russians were running barrage fire tactics, not aiming where the plane was, but creating steel curtains where they calculated it'd be. Like shooting skeet, except the clay pigeon is hauling ass at 500 knots and actively refusing to die. Every 5th round was tracer ammunition. They looked like those Star Wars laser effects, except in reality they meant a projectile fatter than your thumb screaming toward you at twice the speed of sound. The Russians had orchestrated an ambush flak trap, holding fire until he was committed to his exit vector with 0 wiggle room. Smart tactical play. But he had one ace up his sleeve, flying through his own sonic boom. That overpressure wave messed with optical sights, making everything shimmer like desert heat mirage. Gunners were trying to aim through constantly warping air. Their shots were going wide as hell. Then he started jinking. Random 2 to 3G turns every 2 seconds to defeat tracking solutions. On 2 engines, this would be routine Tuesday. On one engine with degrading hydraulics, it was like performing surgery while riding a mechanical bull at a Texas rodeo. The yellow hydraulic warning light had been glowing since the shrapnel hit. Now it went red as Christmas. Primary hydraulic system failure. Backup system kicked in automatically, but only provided 30% control authority. Every control input now demanded massive stick and rudder movement. Every adjustment just got 10 times harder. 23mm rounds started connecting. That distinctive sound of metal punching through aluminum skin filled the cockpit like a carpenter's nail gun gone psycho. He compensated with rudder and differential thrust, except he only had one engine running. Every system failure cascaded into another headache. That aircraft was becoming harder to control with each hit, like wrestling a greased pig with one arm tied behind your back. Through the chaos, he could eyeball Ukrainian territory ahead, maybe 35 miles. The MiG was barely responding to controls, but it was still flying because Soviet engineers built these birds like airborne tanks. Triple redundancy in everything gave him the ability to fly with half the aircraft shot to hell. Behind him, 40 miles back, that JDAM-ER was in terminal dive at 287 meters per second. The drone operators in that grain elevator had exactly 3 more seconds to haul ass out of there. The weapon's FMU-152 joint programmable fuse was set to delay mode. It'd penetrate deep before throwing the party. That bomb smacked the center support column at over 600 miles per hour, punched through it like wet cardboard, then through 2 more floors of concrete and steel like they were made of cheese. Then it detonated. 445 pounds of tritonal, 80% TNT mixed with 20% aluminum powder, converted to pure fury in microseconds. Blast overpressure hammered 300 psi at 10-meter radius. That aluminum powder created a 2,800 degrees Celsius fireball that ate everything instantly, like the devil's breakfast. The blast wave ripped through concrete at 1,700 meters per second, faster than a rifle bullet, creating spalling where the concrete itself became lethal shrapnel. The support column vaporized like it never existed. 8,000 tons of concrete and grain began progressive collapse, each floor hammering the one below at gravitational acceleration. The building folded in on itself like a Jenga tower played by a drunk gorilla. Total collapse time? Just 6.2 seconds flat. The dust cloud mushroomed 500 feet high, visible clear from Ukrainian positions across the river. Secondary explosions rippled through the ruins as stored Igla missiles and drone batteries cooked off, their warheads adding fuel to the bonfire. The Ukrainian pilot nursed his wounded MiG toward friendly airspace, holding minimum controllable airspeed on one engine, wrestling failing hydraulics every damn meter. Behind him, the Russian drone headquarters was smoking rubble. The hunters had finally become the hunted. Mission complete. Bye for now.